Avery Blake stepped off the military transport bus with a calm, measured gait. Her duffel bag was heavy, but her shoulders were steady, her posture straight as a rod. Around her, the air buzzed with tension. Young recruits jostled nervously, some laughing to mask fear, others scanning the imposing training facility as if searching for escape routes. This base had a reputation. It was where the military sent the recruits who were tough enough to survive, where officers turned civilians into soldiers, and where those who couldn't adapt broke under relentless pressure. From the first moment, Avery could feel the eyes on her, not just from the recruits but from Sergeant Cole Maddox. A towering man with a shaved head and a glare that could freeze a river, Maddox was notorious. His job was simple: identify weakness and crush it. Weakness, he believed, had no place in the military. And on sight, Maddox had made his judgment. Avery Blake was weak. That was a mistake. The other recruits whispered under their breaths. "She's going to quit on day one," one muttered, shoving a muddy boot against a wall. Another snorted. "She doesn't look like she's been through basic before. Look at her." They didn't see Avery's eyes, steady and scanning, quietly analyzing every corner of the training yard, every motion of every recruit. They didn't notice her grip on the straps of her duffel bag was not nervous, but controlled, like a predator assessing the environment. Maddox approached, his boots echoing like drumbeats of doom. He stopped in front of Avery and studied her for a long moment, tilting his head as if trying to find the flaw he could exploit. "Name?" he barked. "Avery Blake," she said calmly, voice low but firm. Not timid, not flustered. Maddox's eyes narrowed. That calm. It wasn't the response of someone who would be broken easily. He motioned to the rest of the platoon. "Listen up. Blake here thinks she can survive my training. Let's see how long it takes for reality to hit her." The group laughed nervously, some trying to appear amused, others exchanging worried glances. From the first drill, Maddox singled Avery out. Not in a helpful way, in a testing, grinding way. While others did the standard warm-ups, Avery was running laps beyond the limit, performing push-ups that seemed endless. Her body moved with precision, each motion deliberate, her breath even, controlled like a metronome. Maddox's irritation grew visibly with every flawless movement. "What's her secret?" one recruit whispered to another. They hadn't seen her struggle once. Every obstacle, every timed exercise, Avery completed not just adequately but efficiently. Maddox, meanwhile, fumed. "Weakness is supposed to scream," he muttered under his breath. "She doesn't even flinch." Recruits tried to explain it away. "She's small," one said, attempting consolation. "She's not showing her limits yet." But Avery's small frame belied the strength beneath. Her muscles weren't bulky but taut and honed. Her shoulders were firm, her core rigid with endurance training. Her fingers gripped tools and ropes with a vice-like control. And her eyes, those icy gray eyes, never betrayed the slightest panic or fear. Even the veteran instructors noticed. Private First Class Ramirez leaned over to a colleague. "She's not playing games. That girl is dangerous, and I mean that in the best way." Avery herself didn't speak much. Words were for necessity. She observed, she adapted, and she executed. Every drill, every test, every shouted order from Maddox became an equation in her mind. He pushed her, and she countered without a sound. He tried to intimidate, and she absorbed it without recoil. Each misstep he assumed she would make, she avoided. Each strategy he thought would trap her, she anticipated. Her calm unnerved the men around her. In their world, fear was natural, failure was inevitable, and submission was survival. Avery defied all three. She was not a recruit to pity or ignore. She was a storm forming quietly, a force that didn't need words to declare its presence. By the end of the first day, Maddox had escalated his testing. Laps under the hot sun, crawling under barbed wire, scaling walls that left most recruits trembling. He gave Avery the maximum expected challenge. Every recruit else collapsed, stumbled, or cried out in exhaustion. Avery's movements remained precise. She carried no strain on her face, no hesitation in her limbs. Maddox finally stopped, breathing heavily, sweat sliding down his temple. He had expected her to falter hours ago, to beg for mercy, to break into the sobs he had seen so many times before. But Avery, she stood tall, dripping with mud and sweat, yet her composure was intact. Maddox started, unsure of what to say. You're still standing. His voice was a mix of surprise and frustration. He wanted her to fail. He wanted to prove dominance, but she had proven herself silently and efficiently without a word. Recruits glanced at one another astonished. The whispers began. Did you see that? One muttered. She's not like us. Another, clearly impressed, nodded. She's got training, real training, not like basic prep. Avery noticed the attention but ignored it. She focused on the next exercise. Every muscle in her body obeyed the commands she set silently in her mind. She didn't fight for recognition. She fought for herself. And Maddox, he seethed. The seeds of obsession took root in his mind. He couldn't understand her. He couldn't comprehend why she didn't show fear. He didn't know her background, a daughter of a decorated Navy SEAL, trained in discipline, survival, and combat since childhood. He only saw what appeared to be defiance, a lack of submission, a recruit who refused to bend. By sunset, the day's brutal schedule ended. Recruits staggered to the barracks, some limping, some on the verge of tears, others muttering apologies to their bodies for overexertion. Avery walked at a normal pace, her duffel balanced on one shoulder, skin flushed from the sun and exertion but eyes clear, alert, and unwavering. As she entered the barracks, Maddox's gaze followed her. His mind churned with frustration and curiosity. He had expected her to break, but she hadn't. Not only that, but she had remained calm, collected, and efficient. He gritted his teeth. He was going to push her further, and she would push back. Inside, Avery unrolled her sleeping mat, carefully organizing her belongings. Other recruits glanced at her, some shyly, others openly, trying to glean any sign of weakness. There was none. Avery smiled faintly to herself, a private acknowledgement of the day's victory. Not a victory over others, but a victory over expectations, assumptions, and the subtle traps laid before her. Maddox's voice called out from the doorway, cutting through the evening quiet. "Tomorrow, Blake, I'll see how long your calm lasts." Avery didn't respond verbally. She simply nodded slightly, her eyes meeting his. Calm, unshaken, determined. As darkness settled over the base, Avery lay awake on her mat, reviewing every moment of the day. Every drill, every command, every interaction with Maddox was analyzed and memorized. She knew tomorrow would be harder, that Maddox would escalate, and that every recruit would be tested beyond their limits. But she also knew this. She was ready. She had always been ready. And deep down, she felt a spark of anticipation. The challenge didn't frighten her. It exhilarated her, because Avery Blake wasn't just a recruit. She was a force, and she had only just begun to reveal herself. The morning sun rose over the base, casting long shadows across the training yard, but it could not hide the tension that thickened the air. Avery Blake was already moving before the reveille horn had sounded, stretching methodically, her muscles warmed from years of disciplined training. Her hair was tied tightly, her uniform spotless despite the previous day's grueling obstacle courses, and her expression remained calm, an unshakable mask that some recruits found unsettling. By the time Sergeant Cole Maddox emerged from the barracks, the yard was alive with movement. Recruits ran laps, performed push-ups, and endured plank exercises that tested their stamina to the limit. Maddox scanned the group with hawk-like intensity, his eyes immediately locking on Avery. She stood slightly apart, waiting for instruction, hands at her sides, breathing controlled. His irritation deepened. She wasn't just performing. She was excelling effortlessly, making him feel both impressed and frustrated, a dangerous combination in his mind. "Blake," Maddox barked. His voice cut through the morning air like a whip. Avery turned, calm as ever, and saluted sharply. "Yes, Sergeant." "You think yesterday was a warm-up," he growled, "but today you're going to find out what real training feels like. Drop and give me 20 push-ups. Now." Without hesitation, Avery lowered herself to the ground and began her push-ups. Maddox watched her form critically, expecting to see hesitation, weakness, even fatigue. But he saw none. Every repetition was flawless, controlled, powerful. Her shoulders remained square, her core unshakable, her rhythm perfect. Maddox felt a flicker of disbelief. How is she still standing like this? Around the yard, the other recruits strained under Maddox's brutal pace, many groaning and gasping for breath. Some glanced at Avery, half in awe, half in frustration. She was setting a standard they couldn't match, but it was her calm demeanor that unnerved them most. She didn't complain, she didn't stagger, and she never allowed exhaustion to show. Maddox clenched his jaw, his pride stung. His methods had worked on every recruit before, breaking their bodies to break their spirits. But Avery didn't break. She absorbed the punishment like a trained predator, steady and calculating. Each drill became a silent duel between them, his authority against her discipline. He increased the challenge incrementally, ordering her to run laps with heavy packs, perform plank holds that lasted beyond anyone's limit, and complete obstacle courses in record time. She executed every command without hesitation, her movements efficient, precise, and unyielding. The platoon began to murmur among themselves. "She's unreal," one muttered. "I've never seen anyone move like that," whispered another. A few recruits exchanged wary glances. "Don't get too close, she's not like us," one warned. Avery ignored them all. Her focus remained on the drills, on anticipating the next command, on executing every motion perfectly. She had learned long ago that panic, fear, and emotion were liabilities. Discipline and strategy were her weapons. Every muscle, every nerve, every thought was aligned toward efficiency. Maddox's irritation reached a boiling point. He walked over to her as she completed a series of pull-ups, her arms trembling slightly only from exertion, not fatigue. "You're too calm," he growled, stepping closer. "No one is this calm after the day you had yesterday. Something's wrong with you. Explain yourself." Avery didn't flinch. "I train for endurance, Sergeant. I am used to rigorous physical conditioning," she said evenly. Her voice betrayed nothing. She didn't need to explain further. Her performance spoke louder than words ever could. Maddox's gaze sharpened. His obsession had begun. He would find the flaw, the weakness, the human breaking point that existed behind her calm exterior. He watched her every movement, scrutinized every breath. Each perfectly executed drill became a challenge to his ego. She was showing him, without even trying, that his authority might not be absolute. By midday, the sun had risen high, and the recruits were drenched in sweat. Maddox had escalated the difficulty of every exercise. Avery ran further, lifted heavier, climbed higher, and executed every drill with meticulous precision. No stumble, no complaint, no hint of fear. Even during the grueling obstacle course, she navigated mud, ropes, and walls with controlled grace, ignoring exhaustion while her peers collapsed around her. The other recruits began to notice. Some whispered warnings. "Careful, Sergeant Maddox is going to snap at her." Others simply watched, captivated by Avery's performance. There was a quiet respect building in the yard, a recognition that she wasn't just surviving training, she was mastering it. Maddox, however, refused to acknowledge it. His ego demanded that she falter, that she break, that he prove his dominance. He intensified his scrutiny, calling out corrections and insults, increasing the weight of her packs, extending the running distances. Yet Avery did not stumble. She didn't panic. She didn't react emotionally. Every command became a calculated challenge for her to execute flawlessly. At one point, Maddox threw her a particularly grueling task. She had to complete a sequence of exercises designed to exhaust any soldier, running laps, lifting heavy sandbags, performing push-ups, crawling under barbed wire, scaling high walls. Other recruits crumpled halfway through, gasping for air, but Avery pressed on. Each movement was purposeful, her mind perfectly coordinated with her body. Her strength and endurance weren't just physical, they were mental, honed by years of discipline instilled by her Navy SEAL father. As she finished the obstacle course, dripping in sweat and mud, Avery paused only briefly to catch her breath. Her posture remained impeccable, her gaze steady. Maddox stepped forward, eyes blazing, his jaw tight with frustration. "You're still standing," he growled. "I don't understand it. You shouldn't even be able to breathe right now, yet here you are." Avery met his gaze evenly. "I am prepared, Sergeant. This is what training is for," she said, voice calm, collected. There was no hint of sarcasm, no defiance, only quiet confidence. The platoon exchanged glances. The whispers began again, louder this time. "She's trained," one recruit said. "There's no way she's not. This isn't normal." Another nodded. "She's dangerous," he muttered, half in awe, half in fear. Maddox felt his frustration deepen. He had faced strong recruits before, but none had met his expectations with such unwavering calm. He realized, for the first time in his career, that he was no longer in control. Avery wasn't just surviving, she was thriving under pressure, and worse, she was exposing the cracks in his authority. The day ended with exhaustion etched on the faces of the other recruits, but not on Avery. She had completed every task, every drill, and every punishment without faltering. She had not only survived but excelled. Her calmness was both her shield and her weapon, and it had already begun to unnerve Sergeant Maddox. As the recruits trudged to their barracks, some limping, some silently cursing, Avery walked with steady, even steps. She felt the gaze of Maddox burning into her back, full of frustration, curiosity, and something else she didn't yet understand: obsession. She knew tomorrow would be harder. Maddox would escalate. He would try every trick, every manipulation, every intimidation tactic he knew. But Avery was ready. She had trained for moments like this her entire life. She had learned to remain calm under pressure, to analyze and respond rather than react, and to use every challenge as an opportunity to prove her strength. Deep inside, a quiet thrill coursed through her. The real test had just begun, and Avery Blake didn't just intend to survive it. She intended to dominate it. The morning was heavy with heat, sweat, and tension. The recruits trudged through another grueling series of drills, their bodies already battered from days of relentless training. Avery Blake moved with fluid precision, each motion controlled and deliberate, her breathing steady and measured. Her focus remained absolute. She had learned long ago that panic and fear were liabilities. Discipline, observation, and timing were her weapons. Sergeant Cole Maddox watched her every move like a predator circling its prey. Every successful drill, every flawless repetition fueled his frustration. He couldn't understand her calm. Each step she took, each pull-up, each sprint was a silent challenge to his authority. Maddox's methods had always worked before: fear, intimidation, humiliation. But Avery wasn't responding in the way he expected. She wasn't flinching, wasn't panicking, wasn't begging for mercy. She simply moved, executed, and survived. By midday, the tension between them had become almost tangible. Maddox could no longer ignore Avery, and the platoon could see the storm brewing. He decided to act, to assert control, to humiliate her in front of everyone. The barracks were filled with recruits, all sweaty, tired, and barely able to move, when he finally called out. "Blake, step forward." Maddox's voice cut through the din like a whip. Avery's gray eyes met his, calm but alert. She saluted sharply and stepped toward him. "You've been doing well," he sneered, "but it's time you learned your place. Go take a shower, now." His tone was laced with malice, mocking, designed to humiliate her. The other recruits murmured uneasily. They knew Maddox's reputation. When he singled someone out like this, it wasn't a simple command, it was an ordeal. Avery walked to the shower bay without hesitation. She didn't argue, didn't complain, didn't falter. Her calm was unnerving. She had anticipated something like this, of course. Humiliation, intimidation. These were tools Maddox wielded against anyone he perceived as weak. But she had been trained not to react emotionally, to stay collected no matter what came her way. Inside, the shower bay was lined with cold tiles and metal stalls. Steam hung in the air from earlier use, but the scent of disinfectant and soap lingered. Avery reached for the tap, adjusting the water to a comfortable temperature. The day had been brutal, but this was supposed to be a private, routine moment to wash away sweat, mud, and fatigue. She expected solitude, peace even briefly. That's when Maddox stepped in. The heavy thud of his boots against the tile floor echoed ominously. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a smirk on his face. "I didn't think you'd enjoy any privacy, Blake," he said, voice dripping with condescension. Avery looked at him, unflinching. Her posture was steady, her eyes calm. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her body language alone communicated that she wasn't intimidated. Maddox stepped closer, twisting the shower valve with a sharp, deliberate motion. Water sprayed from the nozzle in a freezing torrent, drenching Avery instantly. She gasped, but only once. The icy water struck her face and uniform violently, intended to shock, to provoke, to humiliate. Maddox's smirk widened. He expected her to stumble, to flinch, to cry out, but Avery didn't. She stood under the water, letting it cascade over her with calculated patience. Her mind shifted into a state she hadn't accessed since years of intensive training. Her father, a decorated Navy SEAL, had taught her that fear was the enemy and control was everything. She was calm, centered, ready. The sudden rush of cold didn't disorient her, it sharpened her focus. Maddox took another step, intending to assert dominance physically. "Not so tough now, are you?" he sneered. But Avery didn't react emotionally. Instead, she assessed the situation in milliseconds. His weight, his stance, his reach. Every movement he made could be countered with precise, controlled action. In that moment, Avery became something Maddox had never encountered. A calculated, trained force ready to neutralize any threat. Her body moved instinctively, using his momentum against him. One smooth, fluid motion and Maddox found himself off balance, sliding on the wet tiles. Avery pivoted, taking control with the efficiency of someone trained in tactical combat. The thud of his body hitting the tile was loud in the shower bay. The recruits outside froze, sensing the commotion, unsure whether to intervene. Avery didn't attack. She neutralized, she immobilized, she controlled. Every movement was precise, efficient, deliberate. Maddox struggled briefly, shocked by her strength and technique, but Avery kept him restrained without inflicting injury. Her voice, calm and even, cut through the chaos. "Sergeant, step back. You are violating protocol." There was no anger, no mockery, no ego, just authority backed by skill and confidence. Maddox, for the first time, looked uncertain. He couldn't comprehend how someone he had tried to dominate could render him powerless so quickly and efficiently. Outside, whispers turned into gasps. Some recruits stared in awe. Others were frozen with fear and amazement. None of them had seen anything like this. Avery wasn't just holding her ground. She was teaching a lesson in discipline and control without raising her voice. Maddox finally managed to push himself to a seated position, sputtering, drenched, and humiliated. He had intended to humiliate her, but the tables had been turned. He realized with a shock to his pride that he had underestimated her completely. She wasn't just a recruit. She was a force trained for moments like this, disciplined, precise, and fearless. Avery released him, standing at attention, wet but composed. She didn't gloat. She didn't revel in victory. She simply executed the discipline she had been taught, ensuring control, minimizing harm, and maintaining respect. Her calm authority contrasted starkly with Maddox's anger and confusion. The officers arrived moments later, drawn by the noise. Witnesses confirmed Maddox's aggressive behavior, and he was separated from Avery immediately. The situation had escalated beyond a simple disciplinary action. It was now an investigation. Avery answered every question calmly and truthfully, her professionalism shining even in the midst of confrontation. By the end of the incident, the hierarchy had shifted. Recruits who had once whispered doubts now looked at Avery with newfound respect. Maddox faced disciplinary measures, his own bias and failure exposed. Avery hadn't just defended herself. She had demonstrated control, skill, and leadership in the most unexpected circumstances. That night, as she lay on her mat in the barracks, Avery replayed every detail in her mind. Every movement, every decision, every calculation had been executed perfectly. She had anticipated the escalation, remained calm under extreme provocation, and neutralized a superior officer without losing discipline or focus. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind a deep sense of clarity. Avery knew the days ahead would only grow harder. Maddox wouldn't forget what had happened, and other recruits would be watching closely. But she didn't fear them. She had trained for this, for moments that tested not just the body but the mind and spirit. And deep inside, a quiet thrill surged through her. The challenge had not terrified her, it had awakened her. Avery Blake wasn't just surviving the training. She was proving that strength, discipline, and preparation were more powerful than intimidation or brute force. As the barracks settled into the quiet hum of exhaustion and whispered conversations, Avery lay awake, eyes open, calculating, ready. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more tests, and more attempts at control. But she would meet each one with the same unwavering focus. She had turned a moment meant to humiliate her into a display of precision and power. And in doing so, she had shown everyone watching what true strength looked like. Avery Blake had survived the first true test, but more importantly, she had begun to establish her own rules. The base had underestimated her. Maddox had misjudged her, and she intended to continue proving that she was more than a recruit. She was a force. The air in the shower bay was thick with steam, cold water mixing with the heat of tension. Avery Blake stood under the icy spray, muscles taut and movements precise, her breathing controlled. Sergeant Cole Maddox had miscalculated. He had intended humiliation, a test of compliance and obedience, yet he found himself face to face with a recruit who didn't flinch, didn't panic, and didn't break. His smirk faltered for the first time. There was no fear in her eyes, only sharp awareness, calm control, and a dangerous patience that unnerved him. Maddox's boots slapped the wet tiles as he stepped closer, intent on asserting dominance physically. "Not so tough now, are you?" he sneered, water splashing from the force of his intrusion. The icy spray drenched her uniform, but Avery's stance did not waver. Cold, wet, and physically challenged, she remained completely composed. Years of conditioning kicked in. Years of her father's Navy SEAL training instilled in her the discipline to remain calm, to read threats, and to respond strategically rather than emotionally. Her mind analyzed Maddox's every motion, every breath, every subtle shift of his weight. He was strong, experienced, and aggressive, but he lacked the anticipation she had honed since childhood. She observed his stance, the tension in his arms, the positioning of his legs. Within seconds, she mapped out every possible move he could make and how she could counter it without escalating into unnecessary violence. Maddox, however, was blinded by arrogance. He had faced tough recruits before, men who crumbled under his relentless pressure. But Avery didn't crumble. She absorbed every insult, every push, every attempt at intimidation like a professional predator absorbing the first stirrings of a challenge. That patience unnerved him. The longer he lingered, the more he realized his authority was not absolute. With a sudden, precise motion, Avery shifted her weight and used Maddox's momentum against him. One smooth pivot, one controlled maneuver, and his balance faltered. The heavy sergeant slipped on the wet tiles, his arms flailing briefly before he crashed down with a thud. Water splashed over both of them, echoing in the tile-filled room like a drumbeat of inevitability. Avery immediately moved to immobilize him, pressing his arm behind his back and ensuring he could not retaliate. Maddox struggled, grunting in shock and disbelief, but she maintained full control. Her movements were efficient, fluid, and disciplined, a demonstration of skill, not rage. She didn't strike him, she neutralized him. Every motion, every grip was calculated, precise, and deliberate. She had no need for excessive force. The recruits outside froze, hearing the commotion through the walls. Whispers turned to gasps as everyone realized the extent of Avery's skill. What was meant to be a simple shower, a moment of humiliation, had turned into a tactical display of precision and control. Some stared in awe. Some feared what they were witnessing. And Maddox, the seasoned sergeant who had prided himself on breaking recruits, could not believe what had just happened. Avery's voice cut through the chaos, calm and even, carrying authority that Maddox could not match. "Sergeant, step back. You are violating protocol," she said. Her words were firm, not angry, assertive, not aggressive. It was a statement of law, not ego, backed by action. Maddox stared at her, speechless, drenched, and immobilized. The tables had turned. He had underestimated her, and now he faced the consequences of that misjudgment. Outside, the murmurs grew louder. The recruits realized that Avery had not only defended herself but had done so with precision, control, and discipline. No one had expected it, and the lesson was clear. Strength wasn't just about muscle, intimidation, or rank. It was about mastery, preparation, and calm execution. Maddox's attempts to regain control failed. He struggled, sputtering, flustered, and increasingly aware that the woman he had intended to humiliate had completely outclassed him. His ego, built on years of authority and fear, crumbled under the reality of Avery's skill. She released him only when officers arrived, summoned by the noise and the unusual sounds of a struggle in the shower bay. Command staff stepped in immediately, separating the two. Witnesses confirmed that Maddox had initiated aggressive behavior, attempting to humiliate a recruit physically. Avery answered every question with clarity and professionalism, calmly explaining the situation without exaggeration or emotion. She remained composed, even under scrutiny, reinforcing the respect she had earned silently through her actions. Maddox, meanwhile, was left to confront his own misjudgment. His authority had been challenged publicly, and unlike any other recruit, Avery had not reacted with fear or submission. She had adhered to protocol, defended herself, and neutralized a superior officer without unnecessary aggression, a demonstration of skill, patience, and unwavering composure. The incident left a lasting impression on everyone present. Recruits who had once doubted her now looked on with awe. Officers recognized the rare combination of skill, discipline, and presence of mind that Avery displayed. She had transformed what could have been a moment of humiliation into a demonstration of professional dominance and strategic mastery. Later, as Avery dried off and returned to the barracks, the whispers of respect followed her. The same recruits who had doubted her strength now shared a silent acknowledgement of her abilities. She had not only defended herself, she had established a precedent. Avery Blake was not to be underestimated. Maddox, reassigned temporarily while the investigation proceeded, seethed quietly. He could not comprehend how a single recruit had outmaneuvered him, physically and mentally, in such a short encounter. For the first time in years, his ego was wounded. His tactics had failed. His assumptions had been shattered. Avery, meanwhile, remained calm, reflective, and ready. She knew this was only the beginning. Maddox would not forget, and other challenges would arise. But she had proven her capability under pressure, and her confidence in her own training had only deepened. She had turned the sergeant's aggression into an opportunity to demonstrate mastery, poise, and precision. That night, as the barracks settled into quiet murmurs and exhausted groans, Avery lay awake, replaying every detail of the confrontation. Every movement, every decision, every strategic thought was logged in her mind for review. She did not celebrate. She did not boast. Instead, she absorbed the lesson, understanding the implications of her actions. Control, skill, and composure were more powerful than intimidation and brute strength. Deep inside, a quiet thrill ran through her. This was the challenge she had trained for, not just physical endurance but mental mastery, situational awareness, and precise execution under extreme stress. The moment had tested every aspect of her preparation, and she had excelled. Avery Blake had survived, yes, but she had done more than survive. She had demonstrated dominance and discipline without losing herself or her humanity. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new challenges, and perhaps new attempts at intimidation. Maddox might escalate again, others might try to exploit perceived weaknesses, but Avery did not fear them. She had been trained to meet pressure with calm, to turn aggression into opportunity, and to respond with precision. She was ready. The events of that day would ripple through the platoon. Recruits would talk quietly, sharing whispers of awe and disbelief. Officers would note the rare combination of skill, restraint, and authority Avery had displayed. And somewhere deep in her mind, Avery allowed herself the smallest acknowledgement of satisfaction. She had faced the storm, and she had remained unshaken. She had taken a challenge designed to humiliate and transformed it into a demonstration of control and mastery. Avery Blake had proven one undeniable truth. Strength was not loud, flashy, or cruel. Strength was disciplined, measured, precise, and it could turn even the most powerful opponent into a powerless observer. And in the quiet of the barracks, as the lights dimmed and sleep claimed the exhausted recruits, Avery lay awake, her mind sharp, her body ready, her spirit unbroken. The real test had only just begun. The moment Sergeant Cole Maddox hit the tile floor, the power dynamic in the shower bay shifted entirely. Water splashed around them, cascading over both of their bodies, echoing through the tile-filled room like a chaotic drumbeat. Avery Blake didn't hesitate. She moved with the precision and fluidity of someone who had trained her entire life for this exact kind of situation. Her hands gripped his arm, pivoting his weight with perfect leverage, immobilizing him without a shred of wasted energy. Maddox struggled, but every move he made was anticipated, countered, and neutralized. He tried to push himself upright to regain dominance, but Avery's training, tactical, methodical, and precise, kept him pinned. Each muscle in her body was taut, responsive, and controlled. Her gray eyes, calm and piercing, held his gaze, communicating something Maddox had never experienced, authority that came from skill, not rank. The recruits outside had frozen at the sound of the thud, unsure whether to intervene. The shower bay, normally a private, routine space, had become a stage for something far greater, a display of control, discipline, and raw tactical prowess. Avery had transformed a moment meant for humiliation into a demonstration of dominance. She wasn't angry. She wasn't reckless. She was efficient. "Sergeant," her voice was calm, even, and measured. "Step back. You are violating protocol." Maddox sputtered in disbelief. He couldn't finish. Every instinct to assert himself, to intimidate, had been neutralized in seconds by someone he assumed was powerless. The very recruit he had intended to humiliate now held him in submission without force, without rage, without ego. He had never faced this before. Avery's movements were deliberate, almost surgical. She shifted his arm slightly, applying just enough pressure to keep him restrained while ensuring no injury occurred. Her control was absolute, and every second she maintained it reinforced the lesson. Authority is earned through skill, not fear. The water continued to cascade over them, but Avery didn't flinch. The icy spray only heightened her focus. Every fiber of her being had been trained to remain calm under extreme stress, to assess, calculate, and neutralize threats efficiently. This was more than self-defense. This was execution of tactical mastery, honed over years under the strict guidance of her Navy SEAL father. Every movement, every breath, every subtle shift was purposeful. Outside, whispers and gasps filled the air. The recruits had never witnessed anything like this. One of the younger soldiers muttered, She's not human, look at her." Another added, "She's Navy SEAL level trained. No one else could move like that." The awe and fear were palpable. Avery's composure, precision, and calm authority left an indelible impression. Maddox tried to speak again, but Avery anticipated it, subtly adjusting her stance to maintain full control. Her foot shifted, her arm applied just enough pressure, her body remained perfectly balanced. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to strike. Her presence alone communicated power. Every tactical instinct she had ever learned was alive and working in perfect harmony. Avery's mind raced silently, cataloging every potential outcome. She didn't panic. She didn't hesitate. She had trained for moments exactly like this. Years of disciplined preparation had led to this instant, where observation, control, and timing converged into a single, decisive action. Maddox, for all his experience and authority, was powerless against someone who had mastered the art of anticipation. The thud of his body, the splash of the water, the silence that followed, it all underscored the gravity of the situation. Maddox's ego, built over decades of commanding recruits, had been shattered in a single fluid maneuver. Avery had not only defended herself, she had demonstrated that skill and preparation could overturn rank, intimidation, and brute strength. Officers arrived moments later, drawn by the noise. They stepped into the shower bay and immediately assessed the situation. Maddox was restrained, seated on the tile, sputtering and flustered. Avery stood at attention, water dripping from her uniform but her posture impeccable, eyes steady, breathing controlled. She did not exaggerate, did not embellish, did not gloat. Her professionalism was evident in every movement. The officers quickly separated Maddox and Avery, assessing injuries and listening to eyewitness reports. The recruits outside confirmed the events. Maddox had attempted to intimidate Avery. She had responded with calm precision, and he had been neutralized without injury. Avery answered every question with clarity, honesty, and composure. Her actions spoke louder than words, demonstrating discipline, authority, and skill. Maddox, meanwhile, seethed silently. He had underestimated her completely. Every drill, every test, every humiliation he had planned had failed spectacularly. For the first time in his career, he was confronted with someone whose ability to maintain composure, assess threats, and execute tactical maneuvers surpassed his own expectations. His ego, pride, and authority had been publicly challenged. The platoon, once whispering doubts about Avery's abilities, now looked at her with awe. Respect, not fear, had been earned in the most dramatic way possible. She had proven that skill and discipline could outweigh intimidation and aggression, that preparation and control could dominate even the most formidable adversary. Later, as the barracks settled into quiet murmurs, Avery took stock of the day. She had acted swiftly, efficiently, and decisively. Every motion had been calculated. Every response had been measured. She had not only defended herself but had established a precedent. She was a force to be reckoned with. Her mind reflected on the incident. Maddox had expected fear, compliance, and submission. He had received none. Instead, he had been neutralized with precision, control, and calm authority. The lesson extended beyond the shower bay. Intimidation could be countered, rank could be challenged, and authority could be earned through skill, not fear. Avery's reflection was interrupted by the quiet murmur of recruits discussing the incident. "Did you see that?" whispered one. "She didn't even flinch. She had him under control in seconds." Another added, "We should all take notes. That's what discipline looks like." Avery didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her actions had spoken for her. Even Maddox, reassigned temporarily pending investigation, could not dismiss the event from his mind. He had been defeated by someone he assumed would crumble. He had faced countless recruits in his career, but none had ever neutralized him with such calm precision. For the first time, he questioned his own methods, his assumptions, and his authority. Avery, meanwhile, remained composed, focused, and ready. She knew the challenges ahead would escalate. Maddox would not forget, and other recruits would be watching. But she had proven her capability under extreme stress, and her confidence in her own training had only grown. She had turned a moment meant for humiliation into a showcase of discipline, skill, and strategic mastery. That night, as she lay on her mat, Avery reviewed every movement, every decision, every subtle calculation. She did not celebrate or boast. She absorbed the lessons of the day, understanding that control, skill, and calm execution were more powerful than intimidation or brute force. She was ready for whatever came next. Deep inside, a quiet thrill ran through her. This was the challenge she had trained for, not just physical endurance, but mental mastery and tactical precision. She had proven that preparation, discipline, and control could overcome aggression, rank, and intimidation. Avery Blake had not merely survived the confrontation, she had dominated it. And in the quiet darkness of the barracks, as her fellow recruits slept, exhausted but enlightened, Avery lay awake, her mind sharp, her body ready, her spirit unbroken. She had faced the storm, neutralized the threat, and emerged stronger, calmer, and more focused than ever. Avery Blake had shown one undeniable truth. True strength was measured not by intimidation, force, or fear, but by skill, composure, and precise action. And she had proven it. The sun had barely risen over the military base, but the atmosphere was already charged. Word of the Shower Bay incident had spread rapidly through the platoon. Whispers floated through the barracks like wildfire. Avery Blake had neutralized Sergeant Cole Maddox in the Shower Bay, executed precise tactical maneuvers, and emerged completely unshaken. The recruits' admiration was tempered with awe and a hint of fear. Few had ever seen a fellow recruit dominate a superior officer without hesitation, without rage, and without chaos. Avery's reputation was growing, and no one could ignore it. Avery herself moved through the morning routine with calm precision, just as she had for days. She inspected her uniform, packed her gear, and prepared for drills, her mind focused not on the attention she was garnering but on the challenges ahead. She had learned long ago that distraction was the enemy. Success was not measured by whispers of admiration, but by preparation, execution, and control. Her gray eyes scanned the yard, reading subtle movements of recruits, analyzing their form, anticipating mistakes before they happened. Meanwhile, Maddox's absence was noted immediately. The normally dominant sergeant had been reassigned temporarily, while an investigation into the incident proceeded. He was furious, not with Avery, at least not entirely, but with himself. He had underestimated her, misjudged her skill, and allowed his ego to cloud his authority. For the first time in his career, Maddox faced the humiliating reality of being outmaneuvered by someone he had assumed was weak and compliant. His frustration boiled, but there was a grudging acknowledgement that Avery's skill had surpassed his expectations. Recruits now looked to Avery not just as a peer but as a leader. They mimicked her posture, her breathing, her precision in drills. Even those who had doubted her before were forced to acknowledge her competence. She had turned a confrontation meant to intimidate into a teaching moment without uttering a single word. Every action had spoken volumes about discipline, skill, and control. The commanding officer of the platoon, Lieutenant Harper, arrived to conduct a formal inquiry. His presence immediately drew attention. Officers rarely intervened in personal conflicts, but the gravity of the Shower Bay incident could not be ignored. Recruits lined up, anticipating the outcome, their eyes flicking nervously between Avery and the officers. Lieutenant Harper addressed the platoon with authority. "I am aware of the incident involving Sergeant Maddox and Recruit Blake," he said. His gaze settled on Avery, calm but piercing. "We will conduct a thorough review, but from preliminary reports, it appears that Recruit Blake acted with exceptional composure, skill, and restraint under extreme provocation." A murmur rippled through the recruits. Some exchanged incredulous glances, others looked at Avery with newfound respect. The lieutenant continued, "Discipline, control, and tactical awareness are the hallmarks of a successful soldier. Today, Recruit Blake has demonstrated these qualities to an extraordinary degree." Avery stood at attention, expression calm, eyes focused. She said nothing. Her actions had already spoken more than words ever could. The lieutenant's acknowledgement was not about her ego. It was a recognition of her abilities, and she absorbed it with quiet pride. Pride, yes, but tempered with discipline. There was work to be done, challenges yet to be faced, and she would approach them as she had all others, with precision, preparation, and focus. The other recruits, inspired and motivated, began to approach Avery subtly throughout the day, seeking advice, observing her form, and quietly emulating her methods. Some were hesitant, unsure if they would meet her standards. Others were eager, recognizing that learning from someone who had proven herself in the most extreme circumstances could provide insights that no textbook or drill could teach. Avery welcomed none of the attention openly. She continued her work silently, leading by example rather than words. Meanwhile, Maddox's investigation progressed slowly, adding tension to the base. The sergeant could not understand how a recruit could neutralize him so efficiently without causing harm. He reviewed footage, analyzed every angle, and replayed every movement in his mind, hoping to identify a misstep or flaw he could exploit in her favor. There was none. Avery had acted decisively, professionally, and with complete control. He had been defeated by mastery, not chaos. The lieutenant eventually concluded the investigation. The outcome was decisive. Maddox was reprimanded for his conduct and placed under supervision for the remainder of training. Avery received commendations for her professionalism and skill, and her reputation solidified within the base. No one doubted her capabilities now. She had turned an aggressive confrontation into a demonstration of authority, discipline, and tactical mastery, without escalating violence or losing composure. Even as the official recognition occurred, Avery continued her training with relentless focus. She ran laps, executed obstacle courses, and engaged in combat drills with a precision that set the standard for all recruits. Every movement was calculated, every decision measured. She was not motivated by recognition or accolades, but by a personal commitment to mastery and excellence. By mid-afternoon, whispers of her actions had reached other platoons. The story of the recruit who had neutralized a sergeant in the shower bay spread like wildfire. Officers and recruits alike were eager to witness her skill firsthand. Avery, however, treated each observation with the same calm detachment she applied to every other challenge. She did not perform for attention. She performed to perfect her abilities. As the day drew to a close, Avery found a quiet moment to reflect. The confrontation had tested her physically, mentally, and emotionally. She had remained unshaken, executed precise maneuvers, and established authority without aggression. The experience reinforced her understanding that true strength was rooted in preparation, discipline, and control, not intimidation, ego, or brute force. Her thoughts briefly wandered to Sergeant Maddox. He would recover undoubtedly, and he would continue to challenge recruits in ways that tested both body and mind. But Avery was ready. She had faced aggression, intimidation, and provocation directly, and she had emerged stronger, more focused, and more confident in her abilities than ever. The recruits, inspired and motivated, continued to look to Avery as a model of discipline and skill. She had proven that a calm mind, precise execution, and strategic thinking could turn even the most threatening situation into an opportunity to demonstrate mastery. Her presence had shifted the dynamic of the platoon, elevating standards and inspiring those around her to achieve more than they thought possible. As night fell, Avery lay on her mat in the barracks, replaying every moment of the day in her mind. She analyzed each movement, each decision, each reaction, not out of vanity, but to ensure that her skills remained sharp and her judgment flawless. She understood that the path ahead would continue to test her, but she was ready for whatever challenges came next. Her reputation was now firmly established. Recruits respected her, officers acknowledged her skill, and Sergeant Maddox had been forced to confront the reality of her abilities. Avery had turned a potentially humiliating encounter into a testament of discipline, strength, and tactical mastery. And in the quiet of the barracks, as the base settled into the hum of exhaustion and whispered conversations, Avery lay awake, sharp, focused, and unshaken. She had faced the storm, neutralized a threat, and demonstrated mastery under pressure. She was ready for the challenges ahead, and she would meet them with the same calm, calculated precision that had carried her through the day. Avery Blake had proven, without question, that true strength was not measured by rank, intimidation, or fear. It was measured by discipline, skill, control, and the ability to remain unshaken under the most extreme conditions. and she had proven it in the most unforgettable way possible. The days that followed the shower bay incident were marked by a quiet but palpable tension on the base. Avery Blake moved through her routine with unshakable precision, each action deliberate, each drill executed flawlessly. The other recruits watched her, some inspired, some intimidated. Whispers spread. She had neutralized Sergeant Cole Maddox, and now her calm authority dominated the platoon. But Avery paid no attention to rumors. Her focus remained on preparation, skill, and readiness for whatever challenge awaited next. Maddox, meanwhile, simmered in frustration. He had been reprimanded, reassigned temporarily, and forced to watch as Avery's reputation soared. Every report he received of her performance, every subtle observation from other officers, reminded him of his own failure. Yet his ego demanded revenge, a chance to reassert dominance, to reclaim the authority he had lost. He planned, he strategized, and he waited for the right moment. Avery, unaware of Maddox's brewing obsession, concentrated on mastery. Each morning began before dawn with calisthenics, tactical drills, and endurance exercises. She analyzed movements, refined techniques, and anticipated obstacles that could arise in any scenario. Her focus wasn't on proving herself, it was on being prepared for real challenges. But the recruits noticed. They started seeking guidance, learning from her example, attempting to emulate her calm efficiency. Avery offered instruction sparingly, letting her actions teach more than words ever could. One afternoon, Lieutenant Harper called Avery into his office. The officer's gaze was steady, serious. "Recruit Blake," he began, "your actions over the past week have not gone unnoticed. Neutralizing a superior officer without injury, maintaining discipline under provocation, it's rare. You've set a new standard for this platoon." Avery remained composed. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I'm focused on following training protocols and performing to the best of my ability." Harper nodded. "And you're doing so remarkably, but I must warn you, your effectiveness has drawn attention, both good and bad. Maddox is still on the base. His pride is bruised and he's looking for an opportunity to assert control again. Be vigilant. Discipline, observation, and timing will be crucial." Avery absorbed the warning without a flicker of emotion. She had anticipated this. Every challenge, every provocation was a test of skill and mental fortitude. Maddox's bruised ego would not intimidate her. She understood the stakes. He could attempt physical intimidation, manipulation, or subtle undermining. But Avery had learned to remain calm, to assess threats, and to act decisively. Later that day, training resumed on the obstacle course. Recruits struggled through mud pits, climbing walls and rope climbs, their muscles screaming with exertion. Avery moved through the course with steady efficiency, each action calculated, each motion precise. Maddox observed from the sidelines, frustration and resentment etched across his face. He noted every movement, searching for a weakness, an opportunity to humiliate or regain authority. But Avery remained flawless. By mid-afternoon, Maddox decided to act. He approached the platoon, barking orders designed to provoke mistakes, pushing recruits to the point of exhaustion, hopping to catch Avery off guard. "Blake," he called sharply, "follow my command, you're too slow, move faster." Avery didn't react emotionally. She evaluated the situation quickly, noting the risks to other recruits, the terrain, and Maddox's patterns of aggression. He wanted her to falter, to react impulsively, to make a mistake. But she didn't. She maintained control of her movements, kept her breathing steady, and executed the obstacle course with precision. Other recruits began to notice the contrast. Some hesitated, faltering under Maddox's harsh commands. Others attempted to match Avery's pace but failed. She continued forward, a calm, unflinching example of discipline and control. Each step reinforced her reputation and highlighted Maddox's failures. By late afternoon, Maddox's frustration reached a boiling point. He could not provoke Avery. His threats, intimidation, and attempts to undermine her had failed repeatedly. He realized that she was not merely following orders. She was observing, anticipating, and responding with skill he couldn't match. Avery wasn't just surviving, she was mastering every challenge he threw her way. Avery, sensing the escalation, prepared herself mentally. She knew Maddox would attempt one final provocation, one last test of dominance. It would require not just physical skill but strategic thinking, timing, and complete composure. She focused, centering herself, ready for the confrontation she had anticipated. The final test came that evening during the hand-to-hand combat drills. Maddox stepped into the arena attempting to assert authority through aggression. "Blake," he barked, "you think you can challenge me? Prove yourself." Avery's response was measured. She didn't flinch. She didn't respond with anger or ego. Instead, she assessed his stance, weight distribution, and potential attacks. Maddox lunged aggressively, attempting to overwhelm her with brute force. Avery anticipated every move, countering with calculated precision. Each block, each maneuver, each step was executed flawlessly. Within moments, Maddox found himself off balance, exposed to counterattacks he had not anticipated. Avery moved with fluid efficiency, using his momentum against him, controlling the engagement without inflicting unnecessary harm. The instructors and recruits watched in stunned silence as Avery neutralized a superior officer with tactical skill and calm authority. When the engagement ended, Maddox stood defeated, sputtering, and humiliated. Avery remained composed, her breathing steady, her posture perfect, her expression calm. She had demonstrated control, skill, and mastery, turning aggression into opportunity and intimidation into a lesson in discipline. The aftermath was immediate. Officers praised Avery's performance, noting her tactical acumen, composure under pressure, and professional execution. Recruits were inspired, recognizing that true strength came from preparation, discipline, and calm authority. Even Maddox had to confront the reality that Avery had surpassed his expectations and demonstrated mastery in every aspect of the challenge. By nightfall, Avery returned to the barracks, exhausted but unshaken. She reviewed the day's events in her mind, analyzing every movement, every decision, every subtle calculation. She had met every challenge, maintained discipline, and established authority without resorting to ego or aggression. The experience reinforced her understanding that preparation, skill, and composure were more powerful than intimidation or brute force. The whispers in the barracks continued, but they were no longer of doubt. They were of respect, admiration, and cautious awe. Avery Blake had transformed the perception of what a recruit could achieve. She had faced aggression, intimidation, and manipulation, and emerged stronger, more focused, and more capable than ever. As she lay on her mat that night, Avery understood that the real test was not over. Maddox's presence, the challenges of the platoon, and the pressures of training would continue. But she had proven, unequivocally, that discipline, control, and skill could turn even the most formidable opponent into a powerless observer. Avery Blake had solidified her authority, demonstrated mastery, and earned the respect of her peers. The base would never see her the same way again. And in the quiet darkness, with the hum of exhausted recruits around her, Avery lay awake, sharp, ready, and unbroken, prepared for whatever final trials lay ahead. The dawn broke over the base like a silent witness to the transformation that had taken place. Avery Blake awoke with the same focus and precision that had carried her through every trial, every confrontation, every provocation. The events of the past week had left a permanent mark, not just on her own reputation, but on the culture of the platoon. She had faced intimidation, aggression, and deliberate attempts to humiliate her, yet emerged stronger, calmer, and more respected than anyone could have imagined. The morning air was crisp as Avery stepped onto the parade ground for the first drill of the day. Recruits fell in line, glancing at her with a mix of admiration and cautious awe. Even those who had doubted her skill now regarded her as a benchmark of discipline and excellence. Avery's calm presence set the tone. Her movements were flawless, her posture perfect, her breathing steady. She didn't speak, but the platoon knew exactly what she represented: competence, control, and unshakable authority. Sergeant Cole Maddox arrived later, reassigned but still lingering on the base, his pride bruised and ego battered. He had watched her neutralize him, witnessed her mastery in drills, and realized that his own authority could no longer intimidate her. He understood now that Avery's strength wasn't just physical, it was mental, strategic, and precise. For the first time, he approached her not as a superior enforcing discipline, but as a subordinate forced to respect her abilities. Lieutenant Harper called a meeting to address the entire platoon. The tension in the room was palpable as officers, sergeants, and recruits gathered. The events of the past week, Harper began, have demonstrated exceptional discipline, skill, and composure. One recruit in particular has shown mastery under pressure, tactical precision, and unwavering professionalism. Avery Blake has set a new standard for what it means to be disciplined, prepared, and effective. Avery remained at attention, acknowledging the recognition with a quiet nod. Her pride was internal, not boastful. She didn't need to speak to validate her accomplishments. The results spoke for themselves. The room was silent for a moment, the weight of her achievements settling over everyone present. Maddox stepped forward, his expression serious, almost reluctant. "I underestimated you, Blake. Your skill, composure, and control were impressive. You've set a standard I can't ignore." There was no malice in his voice now, only begrudging respect. Avery nodded once, acknowledging the statement without arrogance or gloating. This was not a victory of ego, it was a victory of mastery. The lieutenant continued, outlining the formal recognition Avery would receive. Commendations, increased responsibilities, and the opportunity to mentor other recruits were awarded. Her reputation, already growing informally among the platoon, was now officially cemented. Avery had not only survived a hostile environment, she had dominated it, demonstrating that true strength was rooted in preparation, discipline, and mental clarity. Throughout the day, Avery was approached by other recruits seeking guidance. They asked questions about techniques, training strategies, and mental preparation. Avery offered measured responses, demonstrating patience and insight. She emphasized observation, calm execution, and strategic thinking over raw aggression. Her mentorship became an extension of her authority, reinforcing the lessons she had taught through action rather than words. Maddox observed quietly from the sidelines, absorbing the impact of her influence. He recognized that attempts to intimidate or undermine her had failed, and that her leadership was now a respected force within the platoon. He had been forced to acknowledge a truth he had long resisted. Authority earned through skill and composure outweighed intimidation and rank. Avery had shown him, and everyone else, that mastery was more powerful than fear. That evening, the platoon gathered for a final drill designed to test endurance, skill, and teamwork. Avery moved through the exercises with effortless control, guiding others silently by example. Her presence instilled confidence in some, caution in others, and awe in all. Each action reinforced her reputation. She was a leader without needing to claim the title, a master without needing to boast, a force without needing to intimidate. Maddox approached her privately after the drills. "Blake," he said quietly, "you've changed the dynamic here. I see that now. Not through anger or force, but through precision and control. You've earned respect I didn't think a recruit could achieve." Avery's response was calm, measured. "Thank you, Sergeant. I focus on discipline, preparation, and execution. That's all any of us can control." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of experience and mastery. Maddox nodded slowly, a grudging acknowledgement of the shift in their dynamic. By the end of the day, Avery returned to the barracks, her mind reflecting on the transformation of the past week. She had faced aggression, intimidation, and deliberate attempts to humiliate her. She had responded with calm precision, tactical mastery, and unwavering control. She had established authority, earned respect, and inspired others, all without losing her composure or compromising her principles. The whispers of admiration among the recruits had become conversations of respect and emulation. Her example had changed how they approached training, leadership, and discipline. Avery's influence extended beyond physical skill. It had reshaped attitudes, behaviors, and expectations across the platoon. As night fell, Avery lay on her mat, exhausted but unbroken. The events of the past week had tested every aspect of her, physical, mental, and emotional. Yet she had emerged stronger, more confident, and more capable than ever. She understood now that true strength was measured not by fear or intimidation, but by discipline, preparation, and mastery under pressure. In her reflection, she acknowledged the journey she had undergone. The confrontation with Maddox had been more than a test of skill, it had been a test of character. She had remained composed under provocation, executed precise maneuvers, and neutralized a threat without escalating violence. She had earned respect through action, authority through skill, and influence through discipline. The impact of her actions would be long-lasting. Recruits would remember her example for years. Officers would cite her performance in future training scenarios, and Maddox himself had been forced to confront the limits of intimidation in the face of true mastery. Avery Blake had set a new standard, one that would influence the platoon and the base long after she completed her training. As sleep finally claimed her, Avery's mind remained sharp, reviewing each lesson, each maneuver, each decision she had made. She knew the challenges ahead would not cease. Training would continue, obstacles would arise, and tests of discipline and skill would persist. But she was ready. She had faced the storm, turned aggression into opportunity, and emerged as a force to be reckoned with. Avery Blake's story became legend within the base. Recruits told the tale of the young recruit who had neutralized a sergeant, demonstrated precision under provocation, and earned respect without ego or violence. Her reputation spread beyond the walls of the platoon, serving as an example of mastery, composure, and leadership. She had faced fear, aggression, and intimidation, and she had triumphed. Not through anger, not through brute force, not through ego, but through preparation, discipline, and calm, strategic execution. Avery Blake had become a symbol of what true strength meant. And as the base settled into the quiet hum of the night, Avery lay awake one last time in this chapter of her journey. She was ready for what came next, prepared for every challenge, and unshaken by anything the world might throw at her. She had proven herself not just a survivor, but a master, a leader, and a force. The legend of Avery Blake, the recruit who went full Navy SEAL in the shower bay, who neutralized authority without losing herself, who earned respect through skill and composure, was complete. Her impact would endure, and the platoon would never be the same again.